Good morning, everybody. This is Walk the Dog with Riot Mort, and it is 6:30 a.m. on Monday after what was probably one of the most enjoyable weekends I've had in a long time. It was great. Um, so, for details, what happened was Frodan and his wife, along with what was it, eight or nine Wizards of the Coast employees actually drove down to my house. So I hosted and we played Magic the Gathering and TFT. We did a Final Fantasy draft, open 3 packs, pass them along and everything. That was fun. And then we played 2 games of TFT. Everyone had their mobile devices. So I want you to imagine 8 nerds sitting around on their mobile devices playing TFT. And then we did a Chaos draft, which was wild. It was really fun for me because I get to see a bunch of cards I've literally never seen before, and hearing their designers talk about their cards was so fascinating. Some highlights is I got Emrakul and tried to make it work, which didn't work, but still cool that I got Emrakul. And then Froden had this card that says you only have 5 cards in your hand, but you can play every card as a land and they tap as any color, which was really cool. So there's just some fun stuff. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And then Froden and his wife spent the night, so they didn't have to do the drive. And then the next morning, I streamed, and Froden even popped on stream, and we had a good game that's up on YouTube now. It ended up becoming a first. And then I got to stream, and streaming was fun. The set was a lot of fun. It's got some challenges, but my highlight was definitely the infinite mana Caitlyn blowing everything up. That was pretty funny. But yeah, just an overall good weekend. And then I finally got to spend some time with my wife, but she was super helpful getting everything set up and hosting. I don't know. It was one of those things where it was if every weekend could be like this, I would be a very happy camper, because I realized when I'm by myself, that's when I feel the need to work or accomplish something or do something. But when other people are over, I'm happy to hang out and do other things. And so that was a lot of fun. So I don't know. I'm coming off the high of that. That was a good weekend. I'm sure someone's going, well, more. That's how most normal people are. They do this every weekend. And it's yeah, I get it. I'm also, despite being a streamer and everything or whatever, I've learned to fake it over the years. But I'm pretty introverted, and so it does take a lot out of you. I slept like a log. But yeah, it was a great weekend. I don't know. Getting to see other parts of games and talk about design. What we were talking about, the complexity of the Final Fantasy set, and how if you have attachment to the thematics, that you're more willing to accept those complexities because you understand the thematic reason. The case here being summons, right? The summons in Final Fantasy. Hey, bunny. That's a tiny bunny. Hey, tiny bunny. The summons in Final Fantasy, the if you're not thematically interested in Final Fantasy, your version is sagas that are creatures. They're just making sagas more complicated. Sagas were already complicated. But if you're someone who's super big into Final Fantasy, you're oh, that's cool. You summon a creature and it does things and it's short term, just like the summons in Final Fantasy X. That's so cool, which was a really interesting conversation. And there were a bunch of spin-off conversations like that, where we were just talking about design aspects of the game, or talking about the lands problem and what they've tried to do over the years to fix the lands problem. And sometimes it works, but sometimes it's too powerful, and actually if you remove the variance from the game, that actually does more harm than good, because every game plays out the same, which was a really interesting conversation relative to TFT. So I don't know, it was just a really, really good weekend. So I'm feeling good. Now, that being said, this week for me is uneventfully boring. So I don't know. There's something going on at Riot that's taking a lot of people, so like things aren't happening a lot, and I'm not helping with PBE, so I don't know. It'll be a pretty dull week of me just working on a document. Woo! But it is what it is. So anyway, thanks for letting me talk about my weekend a little bit. Now let's get to the questions. And thank you for a bunch of questions came in. Like we were running low last week, and now all of a sudden I went to look and there's like 30 questions. So it was like, oh, okay. There's a lot going on here. So, all right. I want to start with a really, really fun one here that hopefully I won't talk about the whole time, but this is a good one here. So the question comes from Leduc, and it was conspiracy theories. There have often been conspiracy theories in TFT. Such examples include things like every account has a seed that determines what randomness you get. Trying to think of some other ones, but that was the one that I always remember. Like the shop will pull, like make sure that you don't hit certain units or stuff like that. Are these theories funny, harmful, or sometimes true? Can you talk about them? So the answer is all of the above, hilariously enough. So let's use the one I brought up here, which is the whole like your account has a seed. Okay. Can they be funny? Yes. Because if you find humor in like talking about something in a way that's clearly not true, but is like sort of funny, right? Where it's like, hey, the comedic bit here is the TFT team is evil masterminds that are manipulating our experiences to maximize our engagement and our revenue. And so therefore they've created this great algorithm that controls your shop based on like how much you've spent in the past. And that changes the seed that determines the units you get. Like, man, even thinking about like trying to design that sounds awful. But I'm not even talking about the experience. I'm saying like if someone came to me and said, you have to design this, it'd be like, well, what variable affects what other variable? But it's just so ridiculous. It's funny. And like, the people who originate these, or at least maybe I naively hope the people that originate these conspiracy theories are doing it to be funny, right? It's like, wouldn't it be funny if like this is how it works? That'd be hilarious. So I do find them funny in that regard. But there's the problem. Then people start to believe them, right? It's like, if someone like, maybe it's just Reddit, maybe it's, kids on Reddit or whatever, but you get the people that like genuinely think, no, that must be true, right? This is like the league losers queue or anything like that, where it's like, no, it's definitely true. The reason I lost this game is not because I could have played better, not because I didn't see a line I should have considered. It's because my seed is wrong. And it limits self-growth and understanding and creates a cop-out, for the player to blame their issues. And again, when players, we've talked about this before, but like when players when players lose, they either need to blame themselves or blame someone else. And most people will, because it's comfortable, will blame other people. Often, the balance or the other players in the lobby or whatever. This gives them another thing to blame, which isn't great, can create some sort of toxicity towards the game. Now, the other thing is, you said sometimes true. So there's only one example I can think of where I made a decision that, wasn't truthful, but was good for game design. And I don't know. I look back on it and I'm like, there are pros and cons to this decision. And it's such a minor decision. But like even doing it eroded some trust. And that was set 12, the coin flip charm. For those who don't know, the coin flip charm was a 0 gold charm. It said flip a coin, if heads, get a gold. The idea being that it was a stage 2 only low cost charm that you could just click, in the time when your shop had no agency, and just maybe get a gold or not. Fun. Now, when you read that, you go, what are the odds that I hit heads? 50-50, right? Well, no. I made the decision that realistically, this was something that most of the time we wanted players to feel good about. And so I had them change it to where it was 66-33. There's a 66% chance you hit heads, 33% chance you hit tails. Again, clearly lying about how it works, but because it's such a low impact thing, and I generally wanted you to feel good about pressing it and go, yes, I leaned it in favor of the player. Because at Nintendo, I was often taught that, making things beneficial for the player, it's a good thing. Now, to be fair, in the Nintendo context, they're talking about single player games, right? This is the Fire Emblem odds thing. This is Mario Kart items, etc., etc. Actually, Mario Kart, they do have different item distribution for single player and multiplayer, I believe, or they did at one point. But the point remains, a lot of this philosophy was like, the player is having a single player experience, make sure they have a good experience. In multiplayer, giving one player a good experience is detrimental to the other player's experience. And so this is one that, like I said, I made that call, and I think it was right, but what it can do is it can paint this picture that like, hey, in that coin flip thing they lied, therefore now what they're actually doing is they're lying about everything. Those shop odds are complete lies and fabrications, or because one of the ones I always hate is the like, you're level 7, you press reroll once and you see a 5 cost, and without fail, someone goes, nice 1%. And it's like, yes, in fact, this is the 1%. Like, 1% does mean it happens, because again, people are just bad at understanding randomness, especially the lower you are on the mathematical skill and logical side. Your ability to understand randomness, like true randomness, is so bad that you start creating these conspiracy theories because you need an explanation for random, right? This is the, you watch a roulette wheel and it spins the same number 3 times in a row. You can't just, most humans will go, that's not randomness, the wheel is broken. Or the casino is cheating, or whatever, right? Like, people are bad at just accepting pure randomness and pure chaos. So these conspiracy theories happen, and yeah. So, and like I said, I think at the end of the day, randomness for us is just a tool to create variant experiences. And manipulating it doesn't really do us much good, other than we will do light manipulations to remove horrible player experiences. For example, I've alluded to the fact that in absolute extreme cases only, we will show you a unit if it hasn't been seen in a long time. And when I say extreme, like, I've very clearly never talked about this because I don't need someone trying to like manipulate and understand the system, but it really does only happen in the most extreme scenarios. But it was actually done as a result of, a bunch of things, but I think the most famous breaking point was the Soju roll down of like 200 gold where he just never saw a Shaco. But yeah, so we have systems in place that aren't true random, but the stuff like, you have a seed or anything like that, no. There's just no benefit to doing it. So again, to your original question, is it funny? Yes. Is it harmful? Yes. Is it sometimes true? 99% of the time, no, but there was at least one time, yes. So therefore, it's a complicated topic. Hidden rules are another one that, like, and this is what I've told the team before, like, hidden rules can be a good thing if they're completely undetectable. A hidden rule should not be, a good hidden rule is perceived as randomness. A bad hidden rule, like with Headliner, is something that can be learned and manipulated. That just means you didn't design the hidden rule well enough. There was actually one in Cyber City that happened very briefly. We almost got away with it. But this was the Lucky Shops hack. And there was a rule because players were not enjoying the lucky hacks in the early game. The 2-star. This is the 2-star one. Where if early game in like stage 2, the unit you saw in your shop wasn't relevant to your comp, but some other player saw a 2-star unit that was relevant to their comp, they were now at a massive advantage, and that felt unfair. So there was a hidden rule in place that said, until you're level 5, we will actually tailor the 2-star units in the shop, just slightly. And what happened was a couple challenger players discovered that on your 3-1 roll down, you are still level 4. And so you can do a big roll down, trigger that a bunch of times, and get tailored 2-star units for your comp. And I actually tried this once after players discovered it. I played a Nitro game. I did a reroll or a roll down on 3-1, and it was like, yep, guaranteed 3-star Nidalee, 3-star, it was 3-star Nidalee, 3-star Jax, and 3-star Kindred. Just guaranteed. Which for Nitro, and this was after the 237, so this was very, very good. And that was like oops, well, now your hidden rule has been perceived and can be manipulated. It is no longer a good hidden rule. And so we had to change it. I believe what we changed it to was you could only trigger the 2-star shop once per turn. So that even if you did a big roll down, yes, you'd get a tailored 2-star, but it would only be one of them. So yeah, there you go. So who knows what new conspiracy theory will show up next, but whatever it is, we probably didn't do it. Probably. So there you go. All right. Craziest thing I've done on a whim. And the example this person used was they had some family member drive 19 hours just to go see if a mom and pop, the shop that they remembered was still there. And it was. And that was cool. So I was trying to think about this. Because there are some things I've done on a whim that I would call crazy. But I don't know how many. And I had one good example last night as I was thinking about this and writing down the question. I'm trying to remember what it was. Oh, no, now I remember what it was. Okay. So I've done some crazy things on a whim, usually around silly purchases, right? Like, for example, recently I bought like 6 collector boosters for Final Fantasy because I really wanted to go hard on the set. And that was on a whim, but that wasn't that crazy. And, I'm at the point in my life where, like, I can occasionally splurge on myself as long as I'm responsible. And I hadn't splurged on myself in a long time, so that wasn't actually that crazy. But I think it's a lot harder when you're, like, young and this could be risky. And so I actually thought of the weirdest thing I've ever done on a whim. And I came back to this one story in college where some of you might know the webcomic Penny Arcade. Now, at the time, I'm 19, maybe 20. I'm in college on my, like, first or second year of DigiPen. I want to say first year, but I can't remember exactly. And Penny Arcade was a big deal because it's like we're going to a gaming school, we're trying to get into the gaming industry. And Penny Arcade was probably near its height because it's pre-PAX, but Penny Arcade's a big deal. And I'm reading Penny Arcade that day, and Gabe, who I believe, the guy who wears the Pac-Man shirt in the comic, he was selling, he made a post and he's like, hey, I'm selling my, I want to say 70-inch projection TV. This thing was a beast. Remember, it's the year 2000. This is before everyone's got flat screen TVs. And so this thing is just like giant, you know. And he's like, I'm selling it. The price is relatively reasonable. It was like, I want to say it was like $500, which at the time, this TV was probably like $3,000. He's like, I just want it out of my house. And the only thing wrong with it was like the speaker covers had been scratched by his cat. So it looked a little ratty, but like it still functioned totally fine. And this was an amazing TV. And we're a bunch of gamers in college playing games like Halo. And on a whim, we said, screw it. And we bought that, like, I messaged him and was like, you know what, I'll buy it. Because he lived in the Washington area. And on a whim, I decided to buy it for my college room where there were 4 of us living. And so now we have this giant ass TV that we can watch movies and play Halo on. And this thing stuck with me for like, up until, I want to say like, at least 10 years. Because God, lugging it around, like, okay, the very first apartment my wife and I had was like a 500 square foot apartment. And this was when she first got pregnant. And we lugged that thing with us. And trying to get that thing up the stairs and whatever was like insane. Like every time I moved, carrying around this giant TV, giant projection-based TV, like this thing was like the size of 4 of me's. This thing was massive until I finally got rid of it at some point. But it was just like, it's just such a weird story of like, oh yeah, I bought Gabe from Penny Arcade's giant 70-inch projection TV and lugged it around with me because I thought it would be cool to have A, giant TV we could play Halo on, and B, Gabe from Penny Arcade's TV. So it was a fun story. So that was probably the craziest thing I can think of on a whim. Because everything else is sort of like, oh, I went gambling in Vegas a little bit. Okay, fine. That's not that crazy. I haven't done that many crazy things. Or driving 110 miles an hour on the straightaway to the beach. Sure. Not that interesting. So overall, I wouldn't say I do that much on a whim. Although after this weekend stream, y'all got me trying to figure out how I can buy a $1,000 to $2,000 wheel for my house, which is a little silly. But yeah, I'm much less whimful nowadays, because even that, it's like, I'm thinking about it, which means it's not on a whim. So, yeah. I think that's probably the biggest one. So, I don't know, maybe that makes me a little boring and responsible, but that's just who I am. I tend to think things through before doing something too stupid. Certainly nowadays. That was much less true as a kid, but yeah. So there you go. There's your fun story. Hope it was good. All right. Last one for today, probably. Thoughts on direct counter units. So this is like, there's a bunch of examples, but units that directly counter other strategies. So here's the thing. Very early on in TFT's history, we had a lot of direct counter units, right? We had the trait Dragon, which prevented magic damage. We had Vanguards in set 3 that had, if you ran the 6-piece, I think it was 800 armor. Some astronomically high number. In fact, when we were doing the set 3 revival, and they loaded that up, and everyone's looking at this going, 600 armor? Excuse me? Excuse me? But the problem was, you had this vertical trait that was like, only good against physical, and a 6-piece trait that does nothing against magic damage. Not that good, so it had to be pretty extreme against physical damage. You could argue assassins are a direct counter. What we have found is that direct counters in TFT feel too extreme because once you've gone down the path of building a comp, trying to alter that strategy is incredibly painful. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're building a 7 street demon comp, and we had a direct counter, like you're up against someone who's got a big AoE, right? And the big AoE directly hard counters the fact that your hex positioning put you in a bunch. So how do you respond? You can't just like pivot out of 7 KDA, and it feels completely terrible to go, okay, well, the actual strategy is half of my units no longer benefit from my trait because they can't stand in the hexes. That feels bad. It's like TFT is about building up your strategy and sort of reaching the end point of this vision that you had for your comp. And when you have to take a pivot because of a hard counter, it's just too costly action-wise to do that. Now, there are examples, right? Like, let's say, you could build a Zephyr, right, to counter something. But even that was sort of like, the more extreme the direct counter, the less it felt like you had a way to respond. You've already built all your items, so then you're in this awkward position where it's like, actually you have to save your items because you might need a Zephyr later. That's weird. So many bunnies out today. And then, like I said, if you're playing like the dragon example in set 1, it's like, I wanted to play sorcerers. Okay, they played dragon. What do? Nothing. You die. Yay. We tried some stuff to address this with like Paragon in set 3. This was, you would put in Janna, and now, you did more physical and true, or magic and true damage. But, it didn't really solve the problem. And even things nowadays like anti-heal, right? Like back in the day, Shred and Sunder could get up to like 70%, and anti-heal was 50%. But it was sort of like, okay, I'm going to build this really cool tank that can heal a bunch. And then they have a Sunfire, and you're like, guess I'll die. And again, what are you supposed to do when that happens? Well, nothing. So what we have found instead is that hard counters are not good for the game, but soft counters are totally fine, though even that is debatable at this point. I think, you get the Sojus of the world who are like, you cannot play the game without anti-heal and Sunder, and people still believe that. It's like, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they're bad. They're very, very, very good, which is kind of the point. But like, we can't really shrink them much more. Otherwise, they just become nothing. But we have shrank them a lot over the years because they felt too hard countering and felt too necessary, right? So, like I said, soft counters has generally been fine. But the problem with soft counters is that they don't feel like they're worth the cognitive space. And what I mean by that is, hey, there is a way that you could win this fight if you considered positioning where your, Sejuani gets a good ult in a good spot, and then you respond with another ult or something like that. Like, that's the way you can win this fight. But for most players, that's like, I don't know, man, I just position my units in my comp and hope it wins. So it's too hard for most players to understand the nuance of those subtle counters. And so what happens is, based on your player type, let's say you're like a deep, hardcore engaged player who loves strategy, you're like, oh man, they're dumbing TFT down and they're removing a lot of the nuance. But if you're someone who sort of like plays for the thrill of building comps, you're like, sweet, I enjoy that assassins are gone and my games aren't coming down to a 50-50 of side positioning, And so that's kind of where we're at right now. Are we in the perfect spot necessarily? I don't think so quite yet. I think we still could keep moving that lever a little bit, Is anti-heal too strong or too weak? Maybe. Are there other options we could think of that could be counter options? Maybe. Oh yeah, Mystic was another common one, but then Mystic created this expectation where it was like, so Mystic was like a 4-piece bonus, give your team a bunch of MR, and you're like, okay, they're playing an AP comp. So if I go down from 7 KDA to 5 KDA plus Mystic, I'll have more MR and I can beat the Sorcerer. But if it wasn't perfectly tuned in a strong counter, you would get the people who was like, well, I built 4 Mystic, therefore I should win against this Sorcerer board, even though they were down a bunch of units and really, really weak, and all their Mystics were 1-star. And then they'd lose, and they'd be like, well, that's dumb. I built the counter and I still lost. Counters are stupid. And so trying to help them understand that, like, it can't be a complete hard counter, because just putting in 4 1-star Mystics can't let you beat the Sorcerer board. That's also bad design. And so that's why TFT continues to be a pretty complicated game for people to understand, because there's just so many variables, and you can't have a single variable win fights. But yet when players talk about the game, I mean, how do they describe their comps? They go, oh, look, 2-star Yumi beat 2-star whatever, therefore balance bad. And it's like, well, did you look at the rest of the comp? Did you notice you were down items? Did you, people need a central focal point to communicate, rather than the infinite number of variables that are within a TFT game, which makes it hard to convey. Now, I'm saying this like it's a problem. No, that's what makes TFT interesting. That's what makes it deep, is that there's so many things. I wouldn't change it, but it's at least worth acknowledging the fact that when players struggle to communicate, that's what's going on. So yeah, there you go. All right, we are at the end of our morning journey. Hopefully you guys have a great week. I'm hoping to ride the high this weekend. Hopefully you guys are enjoying PBE. I know the team's working hard because Wednesday is branch cut. So any more balance changes they make have to be done by Wednesday. So make sure you're giving them lots of feedback. I'm hoping they can do it. I wish them luck. So cool. All right. Well, that's going to do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.